In the literature I've seen and read about superintendents, and I've only found two situations where either a buyout has taken place or the superintendent has resigned before they were fired. I have not seen, can you tell me, has there been any cases where a superintendent has actually been fired by the state superintendent?
Mr. Guthrie, I got to tell you, this is one of the most sound, logical bills that I've seen in my 4 years down here. I got to tell you. Let me ask you this question.
Sure.
How is it that you can defend a practice that isn't used in 49 other states across the United States? It's somewhat anachronistic based upon the history we heard of how that bill evolved. I mean, I asked what the derivation was, and then we heard testimony about the situation that existed in 1918 or whatever it is. And you would agree, wouldn't you, that circumstances have substantially changed in the realm of public education since 1918? Maybe it's because, Mr. Guthrie, that the local school systems get more than half. In Carroll County, it's like 55% of their funding from the local jurisdiction, not the state of Maryland. Maybe it's because the salary from the superintendent, by and large, comes from the local jurisdiction. So why shouldn't they have a say?
I just want to piggyback on Delegate Shoemaker that I believe that this is a sound piece of legislation. And Mr. Guthrie, looking at the problems that I'm facing in my own county, in Prince George's County, and why we would not want our local school board to have that due process, I want to understand from you, what is that process in which that you believe that there should be a judge and jury to remove the superintendent?
In your testimony that you go before the state superintendent to get hired. Has the state superintendent ever turned down a superintendent for not being qualified?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, that's interesting because they turn them down if they're not qualified, but they don't seem to fire them on the other side. In your statement that you submitted, your last line, we strongly believe in an old philosophy that if it's not broken, then it does not need to be fixed. Well, it was an incident that occurred March 6, 1857. Are you familiar with, would you know what that was?
1857, no, I would not be familiar with
Well,
that.
that's when the Dred Scott decision was
Oh,
surrendered.
certainly I'm familiar with the Dred
And it
Scott
took them
decision.
till May 17th, 1954, 97 years later, to overturn that decision. So just because something has been long-standing doesn't mean it's good for Maryland.
Here's my question, and I'm a little confused by Pazam's position on this issue, respectfully. Because there's other legislation that was introduced last year, has been reintroduced this year, that has to do with the firing of teachers. And under that process, I mean, you've compared that in your testimony, you know, arguing that this doesn't provide the same due process as teachers get. But in the case of a teacher, if a recommendation for termination is made, then the case goes to the local Board of Education.
Correct.
And in that bill, Pazam has argued that the local Board of Education is a neutral party, and you're arguing that they're not a neutral party. So which is it?
So I'm a little confused. I'm reading Mabe's testimony, and Mabe is with you guys. Mabe's for you guys. It says I'm quoting, among the major responsibilities of a county board of education, because I'll be honest, I've sat on this committee for three and a half years now. We don't let county boards of education do a tremendous amount of stuff. There's a lot of things that are dictated to them, what they can do, can't do. They don't have a lot of discretion. Among the major responsibilities of a county board of education is the appointment of a county superintendent of schools, blah, 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 is conditioned on approval of the state superintendent who is charged with ensuring that the proposed superintendent meets the state qualifications.
Correct.
So what are the state qualifications?
Certification as a superintendent.
Okay, so the state superintendent really is just a rubber stamp then on what the county board of education, they're the people who identified the candidates, they interviewed them, they selected them, right? So essentially the county board of education is appointing these people. And then because in many counties, not all, but in many counties, those county boards of education are elected, they change. The people who are on the Board of Education change over the course of 2 years, 4 years, 8 years. So why is it that we invest them almost unilaterally with responsibility to hire these people, but then we don't invest them with the responsibility to be the first line of inquiry to figure out, we're going to fire you for doing things that we think meet these criterions, insubordination, neglect, willful misconduct? Why do we have to go to the state superintendent who, by your testimony and by the way the law looks, that state superintendent is just a rubber stamp? The state superintendent is a rubber stamp on the one end, but is the chief judge of the Supreme Court on the other end under your version of how things should happen. The state superintendent doesn't go out for Allegheny County or Howard County or Cecil County or Charles County or Anne Arundel County. That person, she doesn't go out and identify who the candidates are, advertise for the position, interview the candidates, evaluate the candidates, and say, that's who I want to be the superintendent for my local schools, correct?